All right, Matthew Oliver here from House of Oliver, and I am sitting with the one and only Mr. Sir Tom McClintock. How are you doing today?
Fine, thank you, Matt.
And you're in a race. You're running. How's it going? How are you feeling today?
Well, I think Ronald Reagan had the best way of looking at a race like this: cautiously optimistic. In the primary, I won with 11 points, and our polling indicates we're still running about 11 points ahead. You never want to take that for granted. You never want to get overconfident. Ultimately, this is a district that belongs to the people of the 4th Congressional District, and it's up to them to make a decision.
But you've been representing these people for quite some time. I mean, I think I've seen your name on the ballot since I was born. I don't know. I mean, how long have you been representing the 4th Congressional District?
This is 12 years now in Congress.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So it's not as long as I was thinking. I mean, because I've heard people throw out, you're either a professional politician or a lifetime, whatever politician.
I spent most of my life in
politics.
22 years in the California legislature.
Okay.
Before that, I ran against Arnold Schwarzenegger in the very famous recall election of 2003 as the conservative standard bearer. So.
I never want to get in a wrestling match with Arnold. Like that, I feel like it's not going to go well.
Well, when your opponent is known only by his first name, you've got a name ID disadvantage going into it. But we did real well, and
Sure.
And my point in running was to raise the standard for California conservatives, and it turns out that was the right thing to do. He took the state pretty far to the left in his, including the biggest tax increase in this state's history.
Which I'm not a fan of.
Yeah, me
Which I'm as much as I'm not a fan of that, I'm really scared about this potential tax increase that one of these presidential candidates is wanting to do, and I don't want that to happen.
Well, the Hoover Institution has already looked at the Biden tax increase, and it is massive. I think their projection was it's going to cost an average family about $6,000 a year in earnings when it all plays out. And that's the great lesson of the Trump administration. In the first 2 years of that administration, we won the biggest tax and regulatory relief in the history of the country.
Yeah, it's massive.
And that's when the economy took off like a bat out of hell. Income under the first 3 years of the Trump administration grew about $5,000 for an average family. It had only grown $1,000 for that same family during all 8 of the Obama-Biden years.
Wow.
It turns out when you reduce taxes, when you relieve people of excessive regulation, basically when government gets out of their faces and out of their pockets and out of their lives, people tend to prosper. And
that's something I'm a big fan of. I want smaller government.
Yeah.
Get out of our way. Let us do our thing. Which I have a litany of questions. Like you're representing not just in Placer County, but you represent me. You're a voice for me, and I'm a business. I live here. I'm a business here, and you want my vote. You want their votes, and so I have questions in there, and one of those is. I have been extremely vocal. I'm not a fan of our governor. Mm-hmm. This isn't, to me, right or left wing. This isn't Republican or Democrat. This isn't conservative or liberal. He's not a good human. Well, I'm on the scale of humans.
Well, I mean, I can't look into people's hearts, but I do know this: you're absolutely right. This is not a question of Republican versus Democrat or even good guy versus bad guy. It's a question of policies that work and policies that don't work.
Yeah.
And what we learned with a great price is that high taxes, more and more regulations, crush the economy. That's what we saw when we lost an entire decade under Obama-Biden.
Yeah, good.
And my campaign slogan for years has been "Freedom Works." And that's not an ideological statement. That is simply a practical statement.
That is also
freedom
why
works.
I don't wear underwear, because freedom works. But in that, with the governor,
I believe that falls under the category too much information.
Too much.
Matt.
Well,
you're on a roll. I'll let you go.
We're just being free right now. I said you're going to be the voice of the people, and I'm one of the people. I want you to know freedom works. Woo! But let's talk about though the governor. Let's go back to this. he's not just had bad policies, which I would agree, but some people would still go, yeah, but that's a Democrat, Republican, conservative, liberal thing. But he has had a complete overreach and what I feel an illegal use of power
I believe that.
during this pandemic. But you're my voice. So what have you done? And I think the people want to know, what have you done for me, and what have you done for our district to stand up the best that you can against the bully of this governor to bring freedom to the people?
Well, first of all, look at the organizations that track the votes in Congress.
Yeah.
The National Taxpayers Union is the largest grassroots taxpayer organization in the country. They have consistently rated me one of the best votes in Congress all the time I've been there. A number of years, they have rated me as the very best vote in
Wow.
Congress.
Wow.
Same thing's true of Citizens Against Government Waste, that fights wasteful government spending. And the same thing's true of the National Federation of Independent Business that represents small businesses.
Yeah.
So and it's been very consistent. So people know where I stand. They can trust that. With respect to the governor, I have been speaking out against these lockdowns since the very first day. The day he announced them, I said it was insane.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think that our experience now clearly verifies that. On the House floor in late March, I warned that there is no substitute for reopening the country immediately,
Yeah.
and that the government could not support the economy for any appreciable length of time because the government doesn't finance the economy. It's exactly the other way around. The economy finances the government. You shut down the economy, you shut down the revenues that government spends. So, and if I could just say one other thing.
Please.
Since I said those things in March, we now have many, many months of practical experience with the lockdowns, and we also know of jurisdictions that did not lock down. You remember all of the criticism that Sweden got.
Yep. Yep.
Sweden, there was never a mask mandate in Sweden. Sweden never closed its schools.
And they
It
also
never
do
closed
not
its
require
shops.
underwear.
It never closed its churches.
Yeah.
The only requirement was they tried to keep gatherings under 50. And they took enormous criticism. But
Yeah.
in 33 days, they went from their first death to their peak day of deaths, and then it was a steady decline after that. If you look at the mortality numbers today, COVID-19 mortality has pretty much been over in that country for the last 4 months. They're averaging one
But they
COVID
have a
death
secret
a day.
that most people don't know. They do Swedish fish, and if you haven't had Swedish fish, they are delish. But you did something specific, and I'm going to throw it out there to you because I was proud that you were representing us when the governor was trying to hold money back from Placer County and trying to keep us from being able to have the federal dollars. These weren't California dollars.
Right.
These were federal dollars. And the governor was refusing to give it and almost blackmailing counties, saying, you're going to follow my guidelines or else no money for you. And
By the way, that's not almost blackmailing. That is the very definition of blackmailing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I was proud of Placer County Board of Supervisors. I was in the meeting when they said, what is the potential consequence if we end our illegal emergency mandate? And one, they said, well, we got to do what's right because it's right, not because the governor's blackmailing us. But they were looking at these potential dollars not getting, which is why other counties haven't done it. But you penned and helped pen a letter to the governor demanding the release of these federal dollars.
Oh, listen, I've been against these lockdowns since day one, and
Yeah.
I've been very, very vocal about it, both on the House floor and with the governor. And the damage they've done is just enormous. As I said, we can now look at the difference between jurisdictions that locked down and those
Yeah.
that didn't, not just internationally, but even within our country. You've got Utah and Colorado sit side by side, share a same border, same geography, same climate, same general economy.
Yeah.
Utah, Republican Utah stayed open, Democrat Colorado shut down. The mortality rate from COVID in Utah is about 1/3 of what it is in
Wow.
Colorado, and their unemployment rate is 2/3. I mentioned Sweden. They're averaging 1 death a day now in their entire country. In the second quarter, they took an 8% hit to their economy.
Yeah.
You know how much we took? 31%.
Yeah.
Sweden got it right, we got it wrong. And not only have these lockdowns failed to save lives, they have cost enormous lives. We've seen a major elevation in suicides, drug and alcohol-related deaths,
that is the
deferred
bell
health
I ring.
screenings,
Yes.
deferred health treatments, general poverty-related deaths. There was just a report, 10,000 excess Alzheimer's deaths as these poor folks were left in that state staring at the ceiling 24/7 because of these lockdown orders.
I have advocated, I'm a huge advocate for mental health awareness, and I've been advocating that we are in a pandemic, a self-induced, man-made pandemic of mental health. And the amount of families, you might know, I pastor a church, I'm working in my community, the amount of families that have either experienced suicide or what's not even ever going to make the numbers, the potential suicides.
Yeah. Back in May, I talked to a Placer County deputy sheriff, pulled me aside. At the time, there had been 7 deaths from COVID-19 recorded in Placer County. He says, everybody is riveted on those 7 deaths, and nobody seems to give a damn about the 613 teenagers here in Placer County who've tried to kill themselves this year.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. And Armstrong and Getty did a report on where they had talked to one of the head of the hospitals in Placer County, and he stated that they have more people in their hospital on suicide watch than they do with COVID.
Yeah.
That is a pandemic.
Yeah.
That cannot stand. And I'm grateful you've been the voice trying to help, and I'm sure you and the governor get along splendidly. I'm appreciated that, because not only did you pen a letter that helped stand up to him, but he also released 100% of the funds to Placer County that we were owed federal dollars. Now, I have a couple other questions, though, for you, because there's somebody running against you. Her name is Bryn.
There always is.
It's the nature of a race. And, they've come around. She's been trying actively to, drum up some excitement. And Bren is there's a stark difference between you and her. I mean, first, she's a woman, but there's a big difference between you guys. But one of the things that I find is interesting is she doesn't or didn't live, she's not from this area. She doesn't know Placer County. She's been supplanted from somewhere else, dropped in here to try to take this seat.
Well, I mean, all facts on the table. I live slightly outside of the district,
Whoa!
but I didn't just move here from San Francisco. She was removed as CEO of her company by the board of directors.
Wow!
It was then that she deleted some very controversial tweets.
Yeah.
Took out an apartment in Roseville and announced her candidacy. All of that followed within just a few months.
Okay, but let's get for a second here. We have houses in Placer County. You're allowed to move here. You can we welcome you.
For many years, I bought at the top of the market. The market crashed.
Yeah,
and for many years, I couldn't get what I had put into that house. We're now back at that tipping point, but I'm still looking at a $50,000 bill to move that household.
Yeah.
So I think
you're
at this
but
point,
you're in there. You've
at
been
this
there
point,
for a
I've been
while.
representing this district for 12 years. I live just a few miles from the boundary line, and the district itself stretches all the way from Nevada County down to Fresno County. So it's one of the biggest districts, not only in the state, but one of the biggest districts in the country.
You have to actually go to Fresno.
Yes. Well, actually, we have the great part of Fresno. No, we've got up until
shade. I threw no shade.
Up until the Creek Fire. I mean, Shaver Lake, for example, is part of the district, and a beautiful part of the district.
Sure.
Of course, that was also the center of the Creek Fire. We were there just last week to see the devastation that's occurred because of bad forest management.
Okay, so let's talk about a couple of things. First off, I do throw a little shade at Fresno because my grandparents, my family was from Fresno, and before wherever, and you're a kid, you go over there, and all you see is cows and long drives. And it's hot. Fresno is hot. Can you fix that? Can you advocate for better weather in Fresno?
Well, right now we're in a warming period. We have been since the turn of the last century.
Sure.
And that's going to continue for a while until we enter a cooling period.
It's weird how that happens.
Well, this is the thing about climate change. It's been going on for 4.5 billion years.
So you believe in climate change?
Long before, of course, I believe in climate change. What I am skeptical of is how much of an impact human beings have, particularly when you look at the fact that there have been many periods in this Earth's history when carbon dioxide dioxide levels were many, many times higher than they are now.
Sure.
There have been other periods in the Earth's history when temperatures were far higher than they are now. There have been periods within recorded human history when temperatures were much higher than they are now.
Yeah.
During a period called the medieval warm period, we know that they were growing grapes in northern England. Greenland was the site of a thriving agricultural society for 500 years.
Well, and as a wine drinker, I'm going to tell you, I don't drink wine from England.
Well, you don't get it from anymore from England, because then we entered what's called the Little Ice Age,
Yeah.
when temperatures cooled dramatically. The Thames River in England in Elizabethan times froze over every year. They used to
Wow.
have an ice festival on it,
Yeah.
and it began warming again about 1800 when Thomas Jefferson, in his Notes on the State of Virginia that was published in 1799, noted how much warmer the climate had gotten just within a single lifetime.
Well, and we know it's warming up too, because I will tell you, in England, they are starting to
Yeah.
produce wine. They have some delicious whites and sparklings that they can do now in their climate.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually say that for my family that is across the pond. I can't, let them get angry at me. But I remember hearing one of the heads of NASA come out and talk about global warming.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually said, no, we know there's climate change.
Mm-hmm.
What would be wrong of us is to say that the climate we have now is the best climate there's going to be. To try to hold on and say this is now, we still have responsibility, fiscal responsibility. We still have environmental responsibility. Let's take care of things. I definitely get frustrated with conservatives and Republicans who are like, hey, let's not recycle anything. To hell with the earth. No, I care about the earth, and as a minister, I care about the earth because God gave us. God so loved the world that He gave His Son, not just people, not just Jane, John, Joe. He loved the world, so I love the world too. I'm a fan of the world, but I also don't want to say that, that every decision they're making and these taxings and these more government control is not the answer.
Well, exactly, and the point is that the Earth is going to most likely continue to warm and cool as it has for billions of years, whether or not we destroy our economy, whether or not we put millions of people out of work or into poverty, whether or not we make energy prices so high that people can't afford it. Whether we do all those things or not is our choice. But I think it's a pretty good bet, looking at the history of this planet, that the planet's going to continue to warm and cool. We're in the middle of we're at the end of an interglacial period. We know that interglacial periods last about 15,000.
I have an interglacial period.
They run between 10 and 15,000 years.
Yeah. Wow.
Those are the pleasant times that then that then precede glacial periods. That will run 100,000 years. In the last glacial period, most of this continent was covered by ice sheets.
Wow.
We're about 12,000 years into that 10 to 15,000 year
Well, I just want to let you know
cycle.
I'm starting a new company called Ice Sheets because I get hot at night and I need some ice sheets.
I'm just saying, if you look at the broad history of this planet, Game of Thrones got it right.
Well,
winter is coming.
Winter's coming. Yeah, and it's changing.
Yeah.
But now let me ask you this question, because I feel like you're the guy, you're so smart, you're bringing so much information, but historically, conservatives like yourself don't care for the planet. That's what you're labeled. I'm sorry, but that's what they say about you. And liberals love the planet. The Democrats love the planet. The Republicans hate the planet. That's what's said. But
Yes,
if that's...
But what is said and what is done are two very different
Well, and
things.
so this is a question I have for you. If the Democrats, which our governor is one, love the planet, why hasn't he taken care of deforestation and protecting so we don't have these fires that are destroying the planet? But my understanding from things that you're proposing is actually taking care of our forests so that they can stay. I mean, you're running counter to what's been said about you right now.
Well, it's called gardening. And seriously, an untended forest is just like an untended garden.
Yeah.
You leave it alone, and it will grow and grow and grow until it chokes itself to death.
Yeah.
In that stress condition, the morbid overcrowding, the trees become susceptible to disease, to pestilence, to drought, and ultimately they're consumed by catastrophic wildfire.
Yeah.
That cycle is several centuries long, and the forests don't grow back immediately. First claim on a forest, a fire-destroyed forest, is the scrub brush.
Yeah.
It takes centuries for the forest to regrow. We decided about a century ago that these forests are far too important we want to preserve them for each generation to enjoy.
Yeah.
That's when we formed the U.S. Forest Service. And the U.S. Forest Service are basically the forest's gardeners. Every year they sent in foresters, they marked off the surplus timber, we put that timber out to bid. Logging companies paid us to remove that excess timber. 25% of
you're
the
making money.
Yeah, exactly right. 25% of the proceeds from the federal timber auctions went directly to local governments.
Wow.
The other 75% went into the Forest Service, and we put that back into the forests. Then they started passing laws in the 1970s that have made this process endlessly time-consuming and ultimately cost-prohibitive. It takes 4 years of environmental studies just to permit a forest thinning project, and that costs so much money that we no longer make money on timber sales, we lose money on them. So not a lot gets done. Now, all these environmental laws, you're right, were passed by the green left that said that they cared about the forests and conservatives didn't.
Yeah.
Well, they got their way. We've had these laws in place now for 45 years.
And look at our forests. What forests?
Exactly. I think
What
we're
forests?
entitled to ask, after 45 years of these laws, how's the forest doing? And the answer is damning.
Yeah. Well, and I find it interesting, and I've watched this governor, the way he operates, because he does nothing with the forests. Then a fire starts. He claims a state of emergency, which gives him special powers. And who doesn't like special powers? So he gets special powers, and then he begs for federal dollars. Mm-hmm. Why would you ever fix a forest? Because every time it goes down, he gets special powers and federal dollars, which he gets to spend, which I'm seeing the way he does it. He doesn't put those federal dollars back in the force, and he doesn't put it back in our fire departments. Right. He puts it back in all of his little side projects that he's trying to get accomplished to keep his base rallied, but he's not taking care of our forests, definitely not taking care of our fire department, which is trying to take care of these
now, rising to his defense, which I am not very good at or haven't been doing very much of, most of these forests are federally owned. Most of these forests are subject to the Endangered Species Act, the National Environmental Policy Act. These are the laws that were passed in the 1970s that have made forest management all but impossible and have consigned our
on a federal level.
Exactly right.
Okay.
And most of the forests in California are federal forests. In fact, the federal government owns 48% of the entire state of California.
Wow.
And just by comparison, the entire District of Columbia, the national capital, the federal government owns 25% of that, but it owns 48% of California. And it's
so
a
what
lousy,
could we be doing
and
on a
it's a
federal
lousy
level?
manager. Well, you've got to streamline these regulations that have made forest management impossible, and we've done that now with my legislation for the Tahoe Basin.
Okay.
My legislation gave what's called a categorical exclusion to NEPA for forest thinning projects. We've got about 4 times the timber density in the Tahoe Basin the land can support, so it's just waiting to burn. What we did was to get that into the WIN Act in 2016. That provision has taken the permitting process from 4 years down to 4 months.
Wow.
It's taken the environmental reports from more than 800 pages down to 16 pages. That law, my law, is now being used for the largest forest thinning project in the history of the Tahoe Basin, the Tahoe West Project.
So let me ask you a
20,000 acres of mechanical thinning under the direct authority of this new law. Here's the problem.
That you're doing on a federal level.
Here's the problem, though. In order to get it through the Senate, and because of Democratic opposition, that was mainly Barbara Boxer, we had to limit the provisions to the Tahoe Basin Management Unit rather than the entire U.S. Forest Service. I've got legislation.
But if it works,
it has
then
worked.
You have an example.
My point is it has worked. It's now being employed with enormous success. So we've got proof of concept here. The problem is getting legislation to extend it throughout the forest system. My legislation, H.R. 5218, does precisely that. But whereas the Tahoe bill, we were able to get through on a broad bipartisan vote in both houses and ultimately have it signed by Barack Obama in the closing days of his administration.
Wow.
Now, under Pelosi, we can't even get a hearing in the Natural Resources Committee because these environmental leftists refuse to touch NEPA, and the ESA. And until we do that, we're going to continue to watch our forests burn. And by the way, those same laws have made it impossible for us to build new water storage, which
which
means
we desperately need.
and that's one of the great ironies. We're facing now basically chronic water shortages in one of the most water-rich regions of the country.
Yeah.
That's not nature's fault. Droughts are nature's fault. Water shortages are our fault. Water shortages are a choice we made when we passed those same laws that not only have made it endlessly time-consuming and, as I said, cost-prohibitive to do forest management, it's also made new dam construction cost-prohibitive.
Well, it's interesting, as you say, because, again, the people who are saying they're for the environment, they're not allowing us to have the water to take care of our environment, which is very important. It's just interesting, though, because I had a look of, like, confusion on my face. I don't know if you saw that. But because and just help me with this, and maybe we'll edit this out, but I just need to know. How come then the president is saying I'm going to hold back federal dollars from California for the fires? He threatened that. Now, he did go ahead and give it, but he was going to do that.
No, you're talking about the recent FEMA declaration?
Well,
that was not the president from the start. That was bureaucrats in FEMA that disapproved the request for disaster relief. When the president found out about that, we brought
he
that
pushed
to
it through.
In fact, I went to Shaver
But the
Lake.
headlines, it's all his fault.
I get the headlines, but the headlines don't reflect reality. The reality
Okay.
is when it was brought to him, he said, that's not right, we're going to reverse it. And
they did, and they pumped that through. But hasn't he come out? I'm positive I've read some tweets of his where he's saying, hey, Newsom, handle your forests better, but they're not Newsom's forests. They're the federal government.
Yeah, and that's where I would differ from the president on that. This is a matter of and he you know, I've had discussions with him about this, and I think he fully understands that we've got to change these laws. He's doing everything he can through the Department of Interior and the Department of Agriculture that manages the Forest Service in order to use whatever executive discretion they have to expedite clearance. But the problem is they cannot cross the laws. The laws first have to be changed, and that's where we were making progress until Pelosi took back the House, and now we've had basically 2 years of inaction.
Yeah, well, and this, I guess, is the big question that I have. When I say, and we can go deeper in this, but why should people vote for you this year? What is the fundamental, this is the reason I deserve your vote?
Well,
other than everything you just said.
It's a pretty simple question. Do you want a larger government intruding on your life, micromanaging everything in your life and your business, or do you want the freedom to prosper as an American? I mean, that's one of the fundamental questions. I think one of the great questions we're going to be resolving in this election is whether we're going to have, as Lincoln said, a new birth of freedom, or whether we're going to go down the path of every other failed socialist state. Because that is at the core. You know, people ask me all the time, why are things so bitterly partisan? And I think the answer comes down to this. We've seen one other period in our history when things were very dicey like this, and that was in the years leading up to the Civil War.
I was just going to say.
And that was when Lincoln warned us, a house divided against itself cannot stand.
Yeah.
And if you recall, he says, I do not expect the government to dissolve. I do not expect the house to fall, but I do expect it must cease to be divided. It must become all one thing or all the other. He understood that there were two antithetical principles vying for the future, freedom and slavery. You could try to hold them together in an unstable coalition, but ultimately one has to devour the other. They're polar opposites. They're matter and antimatter. They simply can't coexist. I think that wheel's come full circle. And now the question before the country is freedom and socialism. And if you think about it, socialism and slavery spring from exactly the same rotten principle that Lincoln described when he said it's the same spirit that says, you work and toil and make bread, and I will eat it.
Wow.
You know, think about all the free stuff the socialists offer.
Yeah.
Free stuff. What does that mean? That means you're commanding the fruit of somebody else's labor.
Yeah.
To the exact extent that
My
you're
dad
doing
says
that,
there's nothing free.
that makes you a master and it makes them a slave.
Yeah.
And that's the heart of socialism, and it's always been so in whatever form it takes, including slavery. The leftists tell us, well, socialism is sharing, it's taking care of one another, it's caring about one another. Capitalism and freedom, well, that's just taking care of yourself. That's selfishness. And they've got it exactly the opposite. There is only one possible way to succeed in a capitalist and a free society. The only way to succeed is to figure out what somebody else needs and figure out a way of providing it for them better than they can provide it for themselves. Socialism is taking what one person has earned by helping others and appropriating it for yourself and your friends. That's it in a nutshell. And I think that's one of the great questions that we're going to be resolving as a country. Another of the great questions is whether we're going to be a country at all. My opponent has talked extensively about her passion being open borders. She doesn't believe in borders. At least she said that in all the tweets before before she was officially running and deleted them. And the point is, without the enforcement of immigration laws, our borders mean nothing. And if our borders mean nothing, we're no longer a country. We're just a vast international territory between Canada and Mexico. Being taken advantage of on a regular basis. And history warns us that countries that either cannot or will not defend their borders simply aren't around very long. And at the same time, we've got those issues. We also have the whole issue of our civilization itself, of law and order. It was Lincoln in a similar time who said that there is no grievance that is a fit object for redress by mob law. Wow. And yet what we see in democratically run cities across the country is the return of mob law, of the deliberate withholding of police protection from citizens while the mob runs rampant.
Well, I'm going to tell you right now, what I've seen in Portland, what I've seen in Washington and Seattle, and what I've seen in Chicago, I do not want to see in Placer County.
We've already seen it in Sacramento. We saw the riots. We saw Steinberg, who's supporting my opponent, by the way, withhold police protection from the shopkeepers there. I was down there just yesterday. It's the first time I've been down there since the riots. About a third of all the buildings in downtown Sacramento, right across the street from the Capitol, are boarded up. And by boarded up, I mean they've got plywood all over the...
Well, my good buddy Taro from McCooney's, his restaurant down there in downtown, I'll tell you, there's zero motivation for me to ever open up a spot downtown when they've allowed them. His restaurant got broken into and destroyed 3 different times from these riots, and that's in Sacramento. And I look at Placer County and I go, no, we got to stand up for justice. And I think one of the things, though, and just tell me, I mean...
And I just want to make this one connection here. Without law enforcement, there's no law.
Yeah.
And without law, there's no civilization. And we're starting to get a foretaste of what could come if the left takes over. I think
this is a big thing. I think it's a bigger deal.
This whole
People
defund the police
that.
movement. One of the big organizations behind that is Indivisible. They're also supporting my opponent. That should give you a lot of perspective.
Wow.
And she's proud of it. She's touted that endorsement.
So I want to go back to Nancy Pelosi for a moment, because you get to work with Nancy. And I use that word very loosely. I don't know how much work is getting done with Nancy. Now, is she actually, can you end this debate once and for all, is she actually related to Gavin Newsom?
I believe, I don't know for a fact, but I've heard tell that she is.
Like an aunt or a twice removed cousin on the brother's side? I don't know. Okay, so you don't know either.
I don't know, but I have heard.
Someone's going to look it up and they're going to tell us. But I don't know anybody. I haven't met anybody who likes Gavin. Not one person. I meet people, Democrats, Republicans, all the time. No one likes him. He's just, he shot himself in the foot. He's gone too far. Well, he closed down Disneyland. I mean, when you close down the happiest place on earth, you got to be a pretty unhappy guy. And he's still not opening it up. I mean, they've got it open.
And he's not following the science. He keeps saying he's following the science. He's doing exactly the opposite. What does the science tell us about COVID-19? Well, it tells us that it is virtually no threat to children. It's a serious threat to the elderly. What did Gavin Newsom do? He closed down the schools, and he ordered infected patients into nursing homes.
Back into nursing homes.
The science tells us that outdoor transmissions of this virus are very, very rare. 80% of the documented transmissions occur inside of people's homes. What did he do with that science? He closed the playgrounds, the beaches, he closed Disneyland, and he ordered everybody to stay in their homes. We know from the science that obesity is a contributing factor to the severity of the disease. What did he do? He closed all the gyms. This is completely nuts. And why people are tolerating it and putting up with it. Now we have this new edict. I understand that for Thanksgiving, you're only allowed to have 3 people at your home.
Yeah. It's
Where does it
ridiculous.
stop? It doesn't stop until the people say, we have bloody well had enough of this. We
Yes,
are going
sir.
to recall you out of that office just as quickly as we can. Until the people are ready to do that,
Yes, sir.
they're going to get more and more of the same.
And that's why even when people ask me, I've not been a fan of the mask. I don't wear it. I try not to wear whenever, along with underwear. But I'm not a fan of the mask.
TMI.
I'm saying. You've got all this smart, brilliant information. I got to bring out stuff. But part of my deal is it wasn't just a mask. What started as a mask ended up being you couldn't worship in your church. You couldn't have a church service. You couldn't come together. Now you can't even be with your family for Thanksgiving. It wasn't just a mask. It's a control of a civilization. And what the governor did
By
is
royal edict, by the way. Nobody passed a law.
no law.
No, there wasn't a vote of the people. This is the edict. This is one-man rule, and this is what it looks like, and it's frightening.
No, and that's why when people say, "Oh, look at what Trump's done," no. Trump still has to pass laws. He still has a House. He still has a Senate. He still is doing. The governor's just done what the governor's wanting to do.
Yeah.
He's using these special emergency powers to do all sorts of wreak havoc, destroy lives. Now, with that said, I'm not a fan of Pelosi's either. I don't know if you know this. But yet she still does what she wants to do. She still gets her hair cut, gets her hair done, and she wears a mask when she wants to, and then doesn't when it doesn't suit her needs. And she's doing all this. But I really feel like a vote for Bryn, your opponent, is a vote endorsing Pelosi.
Well, of course. I mean, that's the first vote that's cast in the Congress is a vote for Speaker, and so
And I cannot stand Pelosi.
And that will decide all of the business that that the House of Representatives takes up for the next 2 years. The Speaker, it's not like the Senate, which is a more at least used to be a more collegial institution. The Speaker makes the decisions on what measures come to the floor.
Wow. So you can't even force measures to the floor because Pelosi gets to
You
determine.
can through a discharge petition, but that takes 217 signatures, and we've tried, just to extend the PPP, the emergency loans to small businesses, to try to keep these folks afloat during the shutdown. There's a discharge petition right now. I've signed it. I think almost every Republican has signed it to extend that program, and it's being shut down by Pelosi. We can't get any
Now, why is
Democrats to
Pelosi,
sign on.
This person who wants to say the president's affecting all these small business doesn't care about it. Why is she holding up this next round of trying to help people make it through? People that they've affected by shutting down. So Newsom shuts us down.
Well, I think the reasoning was laid out very clearly by Jane Fonda when she said that
I don't stay up with Jane Fonda.
COVID-19, she said, is God's gift to the left. Well, I'm not sure God had anything to do with it, but it certainly was a gift to the left.
Yeah.
I think they honestly believe the worse the economy's doing, the more people are hurting, the more they'll turn against the incumbent. I mean, you see that constant theme in Biden. I think the people are smarter than that. They know where these lockdowns are coming from. They know the damage they've done to their lives, and they're beginning to understand that COVID-19, it's a nasty bug, but it's certainly not the bubonic plague. And again, getting back to Sweden. Sweden sheltered its elderly, the vulnerable, otherwise left people to their own best judgment. They gave them the best advice they could, left them their own best judgment. And what happened is the virus went through the population very quickly, all of the people who are not necessarily vulnerable to it. For example, we know 80% of the people who get this virus either don't have any symptoms, they don't even know they've got it, or they experience it as a mild head cold. We know that if you're under 50 and in otherwise good health, you've got a greater chance of dying from the flu than dying from COVID-19. So what happened was in 33 days, there was, again, a very, very steep run-up of deaths in Sweden, and then a very steady decline after that, to the point where now it's simply, if you look at the mortality numbers, it's simply, they're pretty much over with. As I said, one death a day in the entire country.
So let's take one shift, because you've talked about people, why people should vote for you. I mean, we've heard, you're a brilliant minds. You've got a ton of information in this head of yours. I don't know where you put it all, but it's been a delight to just sit. I know we've never done this before. It's been a delight to actually get to know you and get some of this information from you and hear just the depth of knowledge you've had. And that means there's a level of, you're qualified in the sense that you have knowledge, you have this, so much depth of understanding of America and freedom works. But tell me your feel now. Now, this is a tough one because I've been somebody who's like, I don't know what's going to happen. I'm thinking Biden's going to win, and because that's what the headlines tell me, and that's what these polls tell me, and that's what this little kid came up and told me. So I just believe these things because I'm told it. But what do you think? You think Biden's going to win? You think Trump's going to win?
I can't predict the future, but I can tell you this. The polls were much worse for Donald Trump 4 years ago in 2016 at this juncture, going into the final 2 weeks.
Yeah.
We were trailing Hillary Clinton by much larger numbers than we're trailing her now.
And he's kind of tightening in some of these battlegrounds, right?
Exactly right. You see the enthusiasm level at his rallies going off the charts, just as we did 4 years ago.
Yeah.
The big scandal 4 years ago was this Entertainment Tonight interview, or whatever they called it. Now the scandal that's unfolding is the systematic use of our foreign policy by Joe Biden in concert with his son Hunter to line his own pockets.
See, I don't even know what you're talking about because that's not in the news at all. So
well, it's out there. It's out there. And among the emails that have surfaced and that have been verified, are an arrangement with a Chinese firm that was really part of
Biden has said he has never ever met these people ever. I heard him say that.
And that has now been shown to be a complete lie. But worse than that, as this company was making these arrangements with Hunter Biden, 10% of the amount, we're talking about a huge amount of money, was being reserved for the big guy. And
so wait a second, you're saying
Biden's business associates have confirmed the big guy refers to Joe Biden. So my point is, all of this is just now coming out.
It's happening now.
Yeah,
because I get the news. I read the news.
And people are seeing that, and I think they're starting to question just what would we be doing, turning over our government to a crooked family like that. I've often wondered how Joe Biden, with a congressional salary all these years, could afford multi-million-dollar estates. Harry Truman once said, "You can't get rich in politics unless you're dishonest." Well, these emails that are unfolding are giving us a graphic and chilling picture
of how you stayed in your house.
How you can make an enormous amount of money.
Any chance you think
this
disqualifies him for any chance you think? How many more days? I mean, I don't know when
12
you guys
more
end up
days.
watching this. 12 more days, maybe then 10 more days. Any chance you think this is ultimately going to disqualify him if there's actually get into this? He made money off of these arrangements. Is there any world in which that disqualifies you from running for president?
Absolutely. Morally, it does.
Sure.
But ultimately, that will be the judgment of the American people. The good news is that they're now starting to become aware of this trail of evidence.
And Hillary didn't delete these emails?
And that,
she wasn't able to get rid of these?
Well, this is a whole different collection. These are actually two collections. One is a collection of emails that was left on Hunter Biden's computer.
Delete those.
But there are now two others. One is one of their business associates who's already gone to jail, who turned over his entire Gmail account with permission to release all of the emails on it. And now there's a third business associate who's come forward and said, the big guy's Joe Biden, and yes, they were
Biden said he's never met that guy. He says, I don't know that guy.
And the evidence seems to be questioning that.
Wow. Well, I'll tell you, the reason
I should say more than questioning, the evidence contradicts it.
Yeah, and it's pointing in one direction. It's going to be interesting to see what happens.
And then it begins to explain, how did he make all these millions of dollars on a congressional salary?
Don't ask questions. Just, the American people, we're not allowed to ask questions. You just do what you're told, you shut up, you take it, and you move forward. And
well, that's the new normal that we could be well involved with. in the near future. I mean, one of the other things people need to concentrate on is what Biden and the Democrats have actually been saying they're going to do. Now, Biden's been close-lipped about it recently, but if you go back, look at what Harris was saying, look at what Chuck Schumer was saying, their plan is very clear. They will abolish the filibuster, which means that the Senate minority has no say in the deliberations.
Wow.
That's just the opening. That's just what opens up the process. They will pack the Supreme Court with additional seats. This was being, they were
I talk
openly,
to people, they don't know what pack the Supreme
what
Court
it means is add as many partisan Democrats as you need to maintain a majority of the court going forward.
And I want you to get that, because I talked to somebody and they said, what do you mean pack it?
Yeah.
You got to wait till people die. No. They want to add more seats so that they can keep a majority.
And make those appointments. And that destroys the credibility. The credibility of the Supreme Court is the fact that presidents come and go, but the Supreme Court justices are there for lifetime appointments. They span many administrations, and they add a stability and a credibility to the structure of government.
It's a checks and balances.
That will all be gone, but that's just the first thing. They already passed legislation out of the House to add the District of Columbia as a state. They will pack the Senate with as many additional Democratic states as they need. Barack Obama's already said Puerto Rico's next. As many seats as they need to permanently pack the Senate.
Do you think we can use that to separate California? Will they let us do that so they can get another seat?
They will under an arrangement where both of the states are reliably Democratic states.
I don't like that. I mean, I just want freedom.
The point is a majority of the Senate and the House can do all of that.
Wow.
They can pack the Supreme Court with additional seats. They can pack the Senate with additional
Well,
states, and they can bypass the Electoral College, which leaves the rural states with virtually no say in the selection of future presidents. And they can do that by ratifying a compact that instructs electors to ignore the wishes, the votes of their own states.
So now,
and again, this is not hidden. They've talked about all this. It's not speculation.
But they're just not asking these in debates. They're not asking this of the candidate when he's running. They're not asking these questions. Those are just being thrown to the wayside, and we're talking about absolute nonsense most
Ronald
of the time.
Reagan used to warn us that freedom could be lost in a single generation.
Wow.
I'm looking at what the radical left is now proposing, and the radical left now is in control of the Democratic Party, and realizing we could lose it in a single election. All of these structural violence to the Constitution could be done within weeks of the inauguration. And again, this is not speculation.
Wow.
You go back and look at what they've been saying for the last several years. This is what they're saying they're going to do if you listen to them.
If they can get the power. Now, is it looking like there's going to be a change of power in the Senate, or is it looking like it's going to stay the way it is?
Well, again, you remember what Yogi Berra said about predictions. They're very difficult, especially when they involve the future. I mean, if you look at the left-stream press, it looks like a very good chance they will take a majority of the Senate and the House and the White House. But as I said, we were hearing the same predictions about the presidential race in 2016, and there were very different results when the American people actually had their say.
Yeah.
I'm also looking at, well, for example, North Carolina. I can't believe that's going to go Democrat this year. I think Martha McSally has got a very good chance in Arizona. My consultant works out of Phoenix, and I get pretty good reports on that. So you look at all of the individual states, and particularly you look at the states like Michigan, Minnesota, after all of the mob rule that we've seen in those states. I just can't imagine Americans who love freedom and respect the rule of law and our institutions are going to turn over the reins of government to the radical left. I was asked the other day about Dianne Feinstein. You remember a couple of days ago during the Senate Judiciary hearing, at the end of the hearing, she makes a bipartisan, gracious gesture to the chairman. It thanks him for the hearings, for the balance of the hearings, and she's immediately taken to the woodshed by Chuck Schumer. And threatened with her ranking member's position on the Judiciary Committee and her chairmanship if they take control of the Senate next year. And they asked me to comment on that. I said, well, it's Senator Feinstein's misfortune to be a liberal in a party that is now dominated by leftists, and there is an enormous difference. I've argued with liberals like Senator Feinstein over the years over the proper role and size of government, but we've always shared fundamental principles. We've always believed in our Constitution and in the rule of law. We believe that people should be judged on the content of their character and not the color of their skin. We believe in freedom of speech, even when we don't like what's being said. We believe in the founding principles of our country. We love our flag. The left shares none of those principles.
Well,
They despise our Constitution. They revile our history and the principles of the American founding. They burn our flag in the streets. They actually believe that you should first and foremost be judged by the color of your skin. And speech, they will viciously shut down speech whenever they disagree with it, intimidate and sometimes harm the people who are exercising that freedom. And we can go down a long laundry list of
and that's
things.
why this isn't just about liberal and conservative and Democrat and Republican. There's something much more sinister at stake.
I actually think that liberals share far more today with conservatives than they share with the radical left that's taken over their party.
See, and that's what I appreciate about this dialogue is because it helps bring some clarity. Because there are people who are going to watch who are conservative. You're going to have people who are liberal who are going to watch. And what this isn't about right and just left. This is about again, a sinister plot to overthrow America.
I wouldn't call it a plot. It's not a conspiracy. They've been very open in what they're planning to do. No, I'm serious. This is not.
I'm hearing you, and it's just it's absurd.
This is
absurd.
This is what they have laid out.
Wow. So here's another tough question. You think we'll know on election night who the next president is?
Again, a prediction about the
I'm
future.
just going to keep hitting it. I've got a whole list of questions right here on this blank piece of paper.
If they involve mind reading or fortune telling, I'm not very good at either.
Do you think...
I do know this. History tells us that in times of peril, the American people, that great silent majority, have risen up and set things right. We've seen that. You go back to the 1864 election, which I think really was the most important election that we've had until this one. I think this one is just as important as 1864.
Wow.
Lincoln expected to lose that election. In fact, everybody expected that Lincoln would lose that election. And the American people, standing for the Union and for freedom, rose up and set things right. And so that's what history tells us. What will happen in the future, I can't foretell.
Well, I definitely think it's going to be interesting. We're in for a wild ride because we have only a couple days left, and it's getting intense. I get a little anxiety over it, and I'm not running for anything. You're running. You look so calm. You're chill. I mean, I know you've been through this a few times.
A few, but no, we should all be concerned about this as Americans.
Yeah.
Because we could be looking at a very, very different country, and one from which there's no turning back. I mean, if they're able to pack the Supreme Court, pack the Senate, bypass the Electoral College, open our borders wide open, grant amnesty to 22 million illegal aliens currently in the country and the right to vote, at that point it's game, set, and match. There's no way back from that. It's not as if a few years from now the American people can say, you know, socialism really sucks. We need to change this government.
It's done.
It will be beyond that by
So
then.
do you run as a Democrat in 2 years then if you win? Just kidding. Don't answer. What can people do? What do you need them to do now? They're watching this. Now they're riled up. They're worried. They're scared. They're concerned. What do they do, especially in California? Because a lot of times you feel like your vote doesn't matter, but evidently a vote for you matters because I don't want to vote for Pelosi.
Every vote matters.
Okay, what can they do?
Which, by the way, is why this mail-in balloting, where they're sending out millions of ballots nationally to people who are on the rolls but are no longer alive, no longer living at those addresses.
Yeah.
There are 13 counties, I'm told, in California where there are more people on the voting rolls than the Census Bureau is telling us there are eligible voters.
My son got 5 ballots sent to his house.
Yeah.
2 of them were the former owners, both passed away.
Yep. And those are real ballots. They could be
voted.
voted.
He filled them all out. Just put the right vote on them.
It's frightening. But how many zealots are going to be tempted? You sent me 5 ballots, I'll send you back 5 ballots. That's frightening. So I mean,
So they need
so
to vote.
and we need to know. We need to be clear on this. Every fraudulent vote that is cast disenfranchises a voter.
Yeah. Yeah. So they need to vote. But is it worth them waiting until election day to vote?
I would look. I don't like the current system. I would prefer how we voted for centuries, and that is we waited until the debate was over, and then on election day, we all went to our local polling place, which was usually a neighbor's garage or it was the local elementary school.
You can vote in my garage. If
We
you want
looked.
to, by the way.
We looked our neighbors on the precinct board in the eye. They handed us a ballot.
Yep.
The chain of custody was very clear. They handed us a ballot. We took that ballot into a curtained booth where nobody could look over our shoulders. Nobody could threaten or cajole or plead with us for how we voted. We cast a secret vote, which is the foundation of a free democracy. And once we had voted, we took that ballot out of the booth, handed it to our neighbor, who then put it into a locked box.
Yep.
That's the way it ought to work.
I heard right now
Unfortunately,
that they're
that's
demanding, the governor is demanding the names of the people who have dropped off their ballots at these extra ballot drop-off
Yeah, think about-
areas.
think about this.
demanding their
Yeah.
names and who and how they voted.
And every mail-in ballot has your name on the envelope.
Wow.
The government can, as they open it up, they can see how you have voted. That was impossible in the old system. They'd hand you a ballot, did not have your name on it. There was no way to identify it, but you were entitled to that ballot.
Yeah.
You took it into a booth and you brought it right back, and it was put into the ballot box. Nobody saw how you voted. Now, it's there for anybody to inspect.
Wow.
And that's another. Anyway, getting back to the point. That's not the system we have. The system we have now is ballots are being mailed out to everybody. And here's the thing. If you return it on election day, it's not going to be counted on election day. It could be counted many, many days later.
Okay.
If there's if they decide that if for example you forgot to sign the envelope, the ballot it will be invalidated.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that can go wrong. Not to mention, is it going to be lost in the mail? So
the
here's
best thing
the
to
point.
do-
Get it in now. There's a place where you can go. It's listed on your on your voting material where you can actually track your ballot to verify that it has been received and accepted by the county clerk. If you mail it in or deliver it now, you'll be able to track that and be sure there are no problems with it. If there's a problem, you'll have the time to go to the county clerk and say,
You can fix it. you can
Exactly
say-
right.
Yeah.
But if you wait till election day, you won't have that ability.
So get it in.
And it will be probably several days later before it's actually included in the count, because it will take that long for them to process this huge avalanche of ballots brought in on election day. Now, again, the old system all accounted for that. You came in, you signed the voter roll, your name was taken off the list as you were handed your ballot, and you turned in your ballot. It was a much simpler system, and it worked. And by the way, without computers, we knew the results of just about every election by 10 or 11 o'clock that
Isn't
night.
that wild? But thanks to COVID, now we have to mail them out, and we can't do it
It's
the way
not
we've always
COVID.
done it.
COVID did not destroy our economy. COVID did not undermine
right.
our elections system. Of bad decisions by government did that, and we need to be clear. Those decisions were made by individuals who should be accountable to us.
Well, we have an opportunity kind of this year. I mean, one, if they don't like Gavin, which I don't like Gavin, and they can try to recall him, sign a petition. I've signed it at least 10 times. But sign the petition, vote, get out there, get your vote in
But
early.
the other thing is talk to your friends, your neighbors, your family members. I'm sure we all have family members who really don't like Donald Trump. And I tell folks all the time, I realize he's an acquired taste. Now, in all of my personal...
I've never tasted him, but
in
I haven't
all
been that close.
In all of my personal conversations with him, he's been gracious, he's been witty, he's been kind. He's exactly the opposite of the caricature. But I understand he says things that are very politically incorrect, sometimes offensive. And I've been explaining to folks ever since he got the nomination in 2016, look, he wasn't my first choice. I started with Scott Walker.
Okay.
Wasn't my second choice. When Walker got out, I went to Ted Cruz.
Okay.
But I can sure as hell tell the difference between a fire and a fireman.
Yeah.
And if a fireman's trying to save my home from burning down, I don't care if from now and then he makes some politically incorrect or intemperate statements.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so,
You don't
but what we
ask.
need to, when we have family members or neighbors or coworkers or friends who are reluctant to vote because they just don't like his personality, we need to sit down with them and to explain what we've just been talking about. The
Yeah.
future of our country is at stake. The future of our freedom is at stake. And we could surrender it in a single election cycle. Lincoln, when he was 29 years old, gave a remarkable speech in which he said, "At what point shall we expect the approach of danger? I say, if it ever reaches us, it must spring up amongst us. It cannot come from abroad. If destruction be our lot, we must ourselves be its author and its finisher as a nation of free men. We are destined to live for all time or to die by suicide." And I think the approach of danger, that danger springing up amongst us, is now here. And it is the battle between socialism and all of the authoritarian aspects of socialism and freedom. Principles of individual liberty, constitutionally limited government, personal responsibility that built the happiest, most prosperous, most envied, and most free civilization in the history of mankind.
Yeah.
And that's ours to lose. And we
Well-
and Lincoln was right. If we lose it, it will be not from some foreign invader. It will be by our own hand. And I pray to God that moment has not arrived.
And that is why we ask that you guys like, share, spread the word. And I'm going to tell you, what I was going to say is when an EMT comes or an ambulance, they come and they're going to give you mouth-to-mouth to resuscitate you. You don't ask them what their last tweet was on Twitter.
Exactly.
You just say, "Thanks for saving my life."
Yeah.
And I'll tell you, there's things that I don't enjoy. I've never gotten to meet the president. There's things I don't enjoy that he says, things I don't enjoy that he does.
I
There's probably
cringe.
even stances he has that I don't like. But I definitely want to see our nation survive this attack, this onslaught. And since you've done great on quotes, Val Kilmer says, "I'm your Huckleberry." So it's my opportunity and your opportunity and all of your opportunities to be able to rise together, and freedom works. And so vote. And what I tell my kids, vote often. And let's continue to see this great nation continue to stay a great nation.
Yep.
Okay. Thank you so much. We will
Thank
be
you,
back. I've got more. We're going to be bringing you more interviews because I want you to be informed, and I want you to stay informed, and I want you to be able to make a difference. Thank you, guys. Until we drink again, cheers.
Cheers.